Goshen Theater Drama Club members, Goshen Theater fans, friends, and family. Welcome to episode 6 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. Joining us today are our hosts, Miss Molly and Miss Katie, obviously. And today our special guest is professional director and actor Ryan Schisler. Some of you might be asking, where's Paul? But we decided that we were just going to have like one special guest for the week this week. And we wanted to sort of keep the core group with the ladies, the quarantine queens. So Paul is not going to be joining us today. So yeah, wait a minute. Oh no. What is going on?
Hey, I didn't get the invite for the Zoom meeting this week, but I pulled a few strings and I hacked into the mainframe. So I'm here. Don't worry. It must have gotten lost in the mail, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy. Hey.
Hi, Paul.
Hey.
Well,
we're so glad you made it.
Yeah. Any hoodle. Welcome to Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. We just did a sketch, you guys.
Went perfectly.
Oh, we hope that amused you all as much as it amused us.
We make our own fun.
We do. So, for those of you,
I think my lack of facial expressions added to the entire sketch. So there you
go. So today we are here with the Quarantine Queens and Paul Regano, and our special guest is professional actor and director Ryan Schisler, the current managing director at the Round Barn Theater at the Barns at Nappanee, home of Amish Acres. Did I do that right?
Yep, I think that's correct. It's a long title.
It is.
It is.
It's a lot of prepositions.
It also sounds like you work for me.
The Barns. Yeah.
Yeah, the KT Barnes. I like that.
I also like the idea that Ryan works for me.
So I am Amber Burgess, the managing director of the Goshen Theater and the producing director of Goshen Theater Drama Club. If you're interested in our summer program, head over to goshentheaterdrama.com to register and for more information. And I also wanted to give a little shout out and a special thanks this week to Goshen Noon Kiwanis, who made our Goshen Theater Drama Club summer program possible. They are amazing. They rock. Here's a round of applause from us. And then I'm going to turn it over to Miss Katie.
Hi, friends. I'm Miss Katie. I'm an actress from Chicago. I'm originally from Missouri. I have a BFA in musical theater from Missouri State University down in Springfield, Missouri. My family is still back in Missouri. Hi, family. I do live in Chicago now, and Miss Amber brought me on as the director for the camps this summer. If you recognize me at all, it's probably because you've seen me in Nappanee at the Round Barn Theater in the past. I've directed their camps for the past 4 seasons, and I was an actress for them for a few seasons. So that's a little bit about me. Miss Molly?
Hey guys, I am Miss Molly. I'm an actor, singer, dancer. I'm living here in Goshen, Indiana right here at the moment, but I graduated with my BFA in musical theater performance from Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm also a choreographer. I'm an intern here at the Goshen Theater. I'll be the choreographer for the Summer Drama Club, so get ready for lots of fun dancing. Yeah, and I actually, when I was little, like 9 years old, I did shows at the Round Barn Theater, and that's how I met Amber, and now I get to work with all of these amazing, lovely, talented people. So I'm happy to be here.
Hey, I just
Nobody asked Paul to talk.
Well,
As
nobody
usual.
invited him for the meetings.
Just interjecting. I'm Paul Regano. I'm a musician and musical director and composer based out of New York City. I am from New York originally. My family is far, far away down on the Upper West Side. You may have seen me this week doing a voice lesson for Goshen Theater Drama Club. That was pretty much the most fun I've had all week until I Zoom bombed this meeting, and I'm so thrilled to be here.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I'll just introduce myself.
Yep.
I'll just jump in. I got this. Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Schisler. I'm a professional actor, singer, director, admin. I do a little bit of everything. I've been in the business for 7 years. I've done a bunch of different stuff, working at regional theaters around the U.S., as well as doing a national tour, the Christmas Carol that toured the East Coast. And a little bit of a secret, Amber's my significant other.
Scandal.
Yeah. No one else in the chat knew that. This is like a new, no, they all knew. They all knew.
Fine, ruin our fun.
Oh, you're getting the full expertise of our household. There's only one actor in our household who hasn't been on Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks, and that's our
And
dog.
it's about time.
And that's Oxford. Yeah, I was going to say, it's Oxford the dog. Yep.
Maybe one of these days we'll have a canine episode special.
They've probably heard him.
Yes, they definitely have heard him. He has been his vocals have been featured on several episodes of the Table Talks. So today's episode is episode 6, which we're so thrilled. We have been at this for 6 weeks, and we have loved the response that you guys have given us. Episode 6 today is all about the first day of rehearsal, what we sometimes in the business call the first day of school. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about how you prepare for that, what you need to bring with you, and some sort of fun pro tips that we have for you guys for ways to sort of cope with those nerves, because we know that it's hard. I know that like when I started a new grade, when I went to a new school, when I worked for a new community theater for the first time, or even when I went to college or my first professional job, all of those different experiences were tough in their own way. So we're going to there's Oxford. So we're going to talk with you guys about that stuff today. And we'd love to hear your questions at the end of the week. So you can post those on Facebook or post them here on YouTube as well, and we will get to those next week. Speaking of, last week, we had one really good question. We had a few, but I thought that this one would be fun to sort of open up to the group. So last week's big question was, what's the worst thing that has happened to you on stage, and how did you fix it? Now, I'm going to modify this a little bit, because sometimes the things that happen that stop the show aren't bad things. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're like interesting, sometimes things just happen and the show has to stop. So then we'll talk about like when the show stopped, what happened, and how those things were remedied. Does anybody have a story they want to share?
I have been trying to rack my brain for like the best one to do, and because there's a lot of times that things go wrong. That's live theater, right? Like things are going to go wrong because we're all human. We all make mistakes, and like we're relying on technology to hold up, and sometimes that doesn't happen. But I was thinking of like injuries, because I also have a lot of those. And my first show that I ever did at Round Barn, it was opening night, and we hadn't gotten to finish a rehearsal earlier in the day on set changing. Like we got to act 2, and then some of the people had to come in and like hang more pieces to our set, and so we didn't get to finish that transition rehearsal. And I had this huge rolling box piece that Santa set on top. It was what was that show, Amber?
Christmas Story.
Yeah, Christmas Story. I was one of the elves, and for the part where like Ralphie goes and sits on Santa's lap and then Santa kicks him down the slide or whatever. So we have this huge slide that like we flip up and then we move the piece with Santa still on it, and it was me and one other person doing it. And when we were moving it off stage, we went to take it back to its home backstage, and we hit a pillar, but when we hit the pillar, it hit with my hand in between the box and the pillar and crushed my hand. And I had to go do a quick change and get back on stage within like 5 minutes. And so I literally thought I broke my hand, and I didn't call hold. I probably should have. That's probably the smart idea. You should probably call hold if you get hurt. I did not. I kept going. I went and got changed. I had the girls in my dressing room like, can someone help me get my shirt off? Like, so they're like pulling my clothes off of me and helping me get dressed. and I ran over next for my next scene change, and like threw an ice pack on my hand. And one of the actors was like, "Do you need me to call the stage manager and be like, hold?" And I was like, no, let's just keep going. And I like stuck the ice pack in my pocket, and anytime I was on stage and wasn't like being featured, I like had my hand in my pocket. It was a fun time. The moral of the story is, if you get injured to the point of tears, where you can't just walk it off, you should probably call hold. But as I stated in my last episode about falling off of step stools during performances and killing my ankle and crawling around on stage, I obviously don't necessarily do that all the time. That's something Miss Katie should work on. So, yeah, I think that's probably one of the worst things that ever happened. It hurt a lot. It honestly still bothers me. I still have like a scar from where it broke skin, and like it still bothers me when the weather's bad. So, life is hard.
What about you, Miss Molly?
I don't think I've ever been in a situation, or actually I probably have and just can't think of it right now, where we've stopped a show, but I have a terrible story about losing my voice, which happens to a lot of people that I know, but it was last summer. I mentioned in the last episode I was in the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, same show that this happened. So in our summer stock schedule, we were so busy rehearsing during the day and performing at night and cleaning the theater and doing all of the things that it's pretty easy for people to get sick halfway through the summer just because we're all pretty tired. So I kind of just had a cold and didn't think it was a big deal. But of course, on the final day of dress rehearsals, I woke up and my voice was barely there, and we didn't have understudies, and I was playing a role where I had to sing a lot, and I was very featured vocally, and I had to do the show. So I remember at the end of my big song, like the last note is supposed to be really loud and belted, and it was just, ah! And that was, I think, the only day that I like left in tears from the theater, because we opened the next night and I was so excited to play this role, like so excited. But I was on vocal rest. If you don't know what that is, it just means you don't talk and you don't sing and you don't use your voice at all. And actually try even not to whisper, because sometimes that can be harder in your vocal cords, whispering than talking. So I spent the next day in vocal rest, and I went to the doctor, and they were able to prescribe me steroids, not like the bad steroids that people take for muscles, but like they're actually for sickness. And I took them because I didn't really have any other choice, and I drink a lot of tea, and somehow the next night I was able to sing the show. But that's about all that I could do in terms of using my voice every day for about a week. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a voice for the show. It was very scary, but it worked out, and you just kind of have to stay calm and do what you can. But that was very scary for me.
Absolutely. Paul, do you have one?
Yeah, I thought of one. So, like I've said in previous episodes, I was just working on the revival, the Broadway revival of West Side Story, but that was not the first time that I had done West Side Story. In middle school, I played Riff, and I was great. But at the end of Act 1, for those of you who don't know West Side Story or Romeo and Juliet, Riff and Bernardo both die in the Rumble, and at the end of it, all of the gangs have left the stage. Everyone's left, and Tony is left alone on the stage with these two bodies, one of which he has killed, and he shouts, "Maria!" And then anybody comes and grabs him and drags him off stage. And so the cue for the folks in the booth to end Act 1 and bring down the lights was Tony shouting, "Maria!" So anybody's entered a little early and dragged Tony off the stage before he had a chance to shout Maria, and our obstinate lighting board op said, "I didn't hear the cue, I'm not going to bring down the lights." And so Tony left with anybody's, and Bernardo and I laid on stage in absolute silence for a good 30 seconds at least. And we were dead, so we couldn't do anything but lay there. And the way that we got out of it, I couldn't do anything to get out of it. But my brother had been sitting right next to a very good friend of mine, all the way in the back of the house, who knew obviously that the act was over and knew that nothing was going to happen. So the way my brother tells it is that my friend Brett Fox went and just started the applause that ended the act to let the lighting booth, the booth, know that that the act was over, and that's what brought down the lights.
Oh, with friends like these. Ryan, do you have one?
To support what Katie said, injuries sometimes happen on stage. If you hurt yourself and you don't feel like you can go on, definitely make the call to say, hey, we need a break, or maybe take yourself out of a couple scenes going forward. And this is coming from an administrator. This is coming from an artistic director. Those people in those positions would rather see you not injure yourself further than continuing to hurt yourself and make it worse by the end of the show. So don't be the tough guy or the tough lady that tries to carry on if you can't. With that being said, sometimes injuries don't just happen to you, but they happen to other people in front of you, and there's nothing scarier than that because sometimes you're helpless and you can't do anything. I remember when I was doing Beauty and the Beast in college, we had a multi-level set. So we had the bottom where the dining room was, and then we had the top where we had the West Wing where the Rose was and all that stuff. And then you could go through a doorway, and behind that doorway was a set of stairs, pretty steep, that led all the way down and then got you to the wings on either side. I had just finished my transformation from nasty, gnarly beast to decently looking prince. And I had gotten up, me and Belle had sung to each other, we kissed, we went through the curtain, and it is pitch black behind this curtain. Well, there were these people that were supposed to grab her hand and help her down the stairs. They weren't there. And we had to get a quick change done, which means that we had to change our costumes really, really fast. So she starts going down the stairs, misses a step, and I watch her head over heel tumble down, and definitely tumbling all the way down these stairs. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, there was nothing I could do. And more props to her. She went on and finished the curtain call. But honestly, if you injure yourself that bad, make the best choice for yourself. Like, we live by that notion that the show must go on, but we also don't want to see you injured. So if you hurt yourself, make the best decision for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a Beauty and the Beast story too. The guy who played Belle's dad was dragged down into through a trapdoor, and the guy who played the gargoyle was supposed to hold the side of the trapdoor up, but he had these latex gloves that made his hands look all gnarly, and it didn't hook, and he didn't realize it. He had a quick costume change to do too. So he left, and the door, as Maurice was coming down, hit him in the face, and it actually knocked him out. And it was his job to close the trapdoor. So it knocked him out, and he was underneath the stage, and it had hit him right in the bridge of the nose. So that's a really sensitive area. So it knocked him in the nose. He passed out and was underneath the stage. The gargoyle guy had left, and the trap was just open. But the way that the set worked, they had just rolled a set piece on top of it so nobody noticed. So no one knew that he had been knocked out. So eventually he came to and went into the girls' dressing room, and he didn't know it, but he had a nosebleed. So he was bloody, and it was terrible. And I was on stage with my friend Heidi Ferris, who has been a subject of the table talk several times. We were on stage together. She was a feather duster and I was a teapot. And she said, Mrs. Butts, there's a good in the palace. And I was like, oh, blah, blah, British things. And then the curtain closed, and we didn't know what was going on. Well, they decided to stop the show for us because someone was injured. So the show stopped, and we all got together to decide what to do and how we were going to deal with the problem of Belle's dad being not in the rest of the scenes. So we got together as a cast to figure out what to do. But I think the thing that it taught me was that when something bad happens to one person, it happens to everybody. So something like that occurs, the team comes together. And that's, I think, the coolest thing about theater is that we're creating all of this art together, and you don't think about it like when you're prepping for it, or when you're like learning your solos or learning the dances, you don't think about how much of a family you're making with everyone. And then when someone gets hurt, everybody really comes together. But he ended up being fine. He did have to go away in an ambulance, which was terrifying. Then ambulance pulled up to the stage door and picked him up. Yeah, it's everybody just came together to sort of fix the problem. The other one was when we were doing the 39 steps, and a girl was supposed to put on a pair of handcuffs. She gets handcuffed, and we had it marked because she had to slip out of the handcuffs later. We had a piece of tape on the teeth where it was supposed to stop. And she's there, she's like trying to sneak out of the handcuff while the other person is sleeping. And she goes, there was nothing for it. The stage manager was Michael Redondo, Miss Katie, the person that recommended you for the job that I hired you for later in that year.
Redondo.
So our stage manager, Michael Redondo, grabbed the handcuff key, walked up to the stage through the audience and was like, technical difficulties, and unlocked the thing. And she left, and we just went on with it. Sometimes something goes wrong, you got to depend on your friends to save you. And like, that's the story of it. That's how it goes. So, and everybody just kept going, and everyone in the audience really wants you to keep going and really wants you to be successful. So they're all conspiring for you. They want it to go well. So those are probably.
I also find that like audiences like stuff like that too. They feel like they're a part of some secret club. Ooh, I saw something that no one else got to see, and they remember that for years.
Exactly. So sometimes things going sideways are the perfect thing. Sometimes it's great. That was great. So I think like we're just going to cover that question this week. We had a couple of other pretty good questions about like what to do about things going wrong, or specific questions for folks. And maybe we'll fold some of those in if we don't get a lot of questions about the first day of school today. So we're going to move on to the regular part of our episode today. We're dedicating the hour today to what you need to do to prepare for that first day of rehearsal. We've done our big audition series. We're going to assume that you guys booked that job, you got that part, and that you are going to your first day with a new group of people, or a new grade, or a new school. We've got a peanut gallery over at Miss Katie's house. It happens. We're filming from 2 locations at our house, so it happens.
True.
So if you've never done a show before with a new group of people, it can be intimidating. So we wanted to dedicate some time to that for you guys, because that's the thing that we've heard all this feedback, like, oh, it's fine that we're doing auditions and it's great, but what do you do when you actually are confronted with meeting this new group of people? So I know that Miss Katie has a good topic for this, so I'm going to turn it over to her, and we're going to start with Miss Katie.
So first up to bat, we've got, before you go to rehearsal, what do you need to do before that first rehearsal? The first thing I always do is I hopefully I get my script before the first rehearsal. That's always the hope. Sometimes you don't, and that's okay, but then you should still be doing your research before then. So when I do get my script before we start rehearsals, I will go through and I will mark it up. I will go through and I will, if I'm allowed to use highlighter, I will highlight my lines. If I'm not, then I mark it with a pencil. I usually just put like a little dash next to it. I will also look at all the stage directions and usually mark those up as well, because I know they may change with what the director might have, but I at least want a good idea of like, I exit here. I may not know where I exit yet, but I do exit. I'm looking at cue lines so I can start memorizing already. And I'm also researching my character. I'm looking at the time period that we're set in, seeing what kind of things were going on in the world at that time, if it's a more historical play or based in realism. If it's more of a fantastical thing, well, then I may be researching the playwright and other fantastical things he's done so I know where his mind was when he was reading it. It's really just reading your show, getting your lines marked, and then researching your character, start making those choices so that when you walk in the room, your director has something to start with as a baseline when they start directing you on stage. They shouldn't have to do all the work. You should come in with some ideas, and then you guys can build together. You may not be on the right track with them when you walk in, like some decisions you made may not work with the artistic vision that they have for your character, and be okay to let that go. That's fine. You guys can build something new together because you guys are a team. But really, it's just doing that legwork before you get started. Any other thoughts, anybody?
To piggyback on what Katie said, it is good to have an idea on what you want to do when you come in before the first day of rehearsals. Try not to lock anything in, though. There needs to be a little bit of fluidity with the director and with you as a performer, because you guys are going to have different ideas. It's like what Katie said. You're going to work together as a team to find how to best interpret this character or best do the show. So try not to lock in too much when you come in, because it will really handcuff you in the long run if a director's like, hey, let's try it this way, because you've been working it another way before you came in for that first rehearsal. I find that that's a lot of problems that I run into a lot. Is I'll be working on a show and I'll work on it at the house and I'll be like, oh, this time I'm gonna play this character and he's gonna have this look and this accent. Like, it's best to not lock anything in, because there may be a completely different interpretation that your director gives you. So yeah, that would be my best advice. And honestly, as simple as it gets, read the show. Know the show before you come in. Sometimes you do a table read, which is where everyone sits in a circle and reads the script together. But if you read the show before you come into that first day of rehearsals, you're going to be ahead of the curve.
To follow up on what Ryan said, we're just piggybacking, a double piggyback here. In terms of like the idea of locking into something and then you get to rehearsal and the director's like, no, we're going to play that character upside down, whatever it is. Remember that ultimately the job of everyone in that theater is to bring the director's vision to fruition. And it is a team sport, and everyone has input and everyone has obviously a part in that. And it's not to say that you can't be creative and you're just a mechanical cog in a giant machine. But ultimately, if you say, hey, I thought I would do this entire character in a Cockney accent because that's what I got from the text. And the director said, well, the play is set in Brooklyn and I don't think so. Then that's that. I mean, you can talk with the director and they may want to explain why they're doing it a certain way. But at the end of the day, it is the director's call and you have to respect that. So yes to Miss Katie, absolutely. Have ideas and come with something ready. And yes to Ryan, definitely know the show. And yes to both of them, don't lock into anything because you are still serving the piece. You are at the service of the play, not the other way around.
To piggyback off of Paul's piggyback off of Ryan's piggyback, so to triple piggyback, I would just say just to be ready to say yes to whatever the director, stage manager, or music director asks. I know as an actor, I've had, even friends that a director will ask them to do something in the rehearsal and they, really don't agree with that thought or the way that they were asked to do something. And you can tell that they aren't very happy about doing that. And actors who aren't easy to work with, usually a director will notice that and then they won't want to work with them again after that show. So even when you leave rehearsal, just don't try and bring a negative energy to anything. Yeah, that's what I would say.
And to Molly's point, if you are arguing with a director, you're slowing down the process. Yeah. You don't want to slow down the process, especially if you're working in a professional theater and you have 2.5 weeks to put up a show. If you're going to spend 15 minutes of that rehearsal period arguing with the director that what they want you to do is not what you envision yourself doing, you're just slowing down the entire process and hurting your entire ensemble. Yeah. So yeah, I think being open is the best way to go.
Yeah, in 15 minutes, I can block 6 scenes.
Yeah.
What Miss Molly said about saying yes is so important. It's a trust thing. like Ryan said, it's you should never be arguing. It should always be a discussion, and there has to be a mutual respect. And a director should be able to say to you, I hear what you're saying. I need you to trust me. Do this, even if it's uncomfortable, and do this for me, and we're going to, and trust that it's going to work.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a good director, as a good director, you're going to listen to what the actor has to say, because the actor's job is to perform successfully in the role. Like, you hired them or you brought them on to do the show because you trust their work. So, but as a director, you also need to be a team player. You can't be a dictator, or you can't be the one that's like trying to call all the shots, like lift your pinky this high when you drink out of your teacup. Like, that kind of stuff is a little bit too much. It's that, got to keep in mind that it's always a team atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing, like as a preparation tactic, there's one pet peeve that I have that I'm going to share. And I know a lot of people like to do this, but I would recommend against it. And I would say, don't watch the movie. If there is a movie of the musical, don't watch it, because probably there's been some interpretation. Like, if you watched the movie of Annie, we know that a lot of our campers have auditioned for or done the musical Annie, or are looking forward to doing it soon because it's got such great parts for young people in it. If you watch the movie of Annie, you are not going to have an idea of what that musical is about, because the movie is wildly different. And actually, two of the film interpretations are wildly different than the stage interpretation. And there is one version that is the stage version taped. You could watch that if you wanted to get an idea instead of reading it. But the thing that happens when you watch other people is you start to make sounds like they make. You start to talk like they talk unconsciously. And sometimes there's this show called Plain and Fancy. This is a good example of this, that we did at the Round Barn Theater for years and years and years. And I always hear particular performers in my ears. Like, you hear it the way that they said it, and that seems like the way that it should be said. So when someone fresh comes in and they have a new way to say something, it's sometimes jarring. So you don't want to get in your head that there's one particular way for a song to be sung, or one particular way for a line to be said. My favorite recent example of this is, if you get the chance, listen to the way the girl in the Broadway cast of Frozen sings Let It Go versus the way Idina Menzel sings Let It Go. She probably saw the movie, but she let herself be open to her own interpretation of Let It Go. So if you guys have the ability to do that on the YouTube, since you're watching this, check that out. I think it's important for you as a performer to know what your strengths are and play those strengths, and don't try to be somebody you're not. 2 cents. Rosie has 2 cents. Do you want to be on TV? You want to be on TV? Come here.
It's happening.
Rosie Roo.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, Rosie.
She's mad at the world right now.
Fun story about Rosie. She was supposed to be my dog when I played Paulette for Legally Blonde. And sometimes Rosie didn't like being backstage, so we carried her around in Elle's purse all the time. Like, I would have her literally with me always backstage. She'd sit in my chair when I was getting changed and stuff, because if I didn't, she would start to bark backstage.
She would.
So we couldn't put her in her crate. So she would be in this bag, and then I would have to pass her off to certain people when I would have to go be on stage and she wasn't with me. And so I'd like pass her off to Ashley backstage, our costumer. And then one time Ashley had to fix someone's costume while she was supposed to have Rosie on her arm. So she hung her on the hook backstage while she fixed someone's costume from that.
I love that. Rosie,
Why have you never told me that story?
I don't know. You were probably on stage at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's funny. So Molly, let's talk about the inner game of prepping for your first day of rehearsal.
Yeah. So I'm one of those people, and maybe you all feel the same way, and maybe this is why we all do theater, but whenever the first day of rehearsal is coming up, it feels like Christmas to me. Like, I get so excited. I remember, like, when I was in high school, even like when I knew after school that day it was the first rehearsal for the spring musical, I couldn't focus. I was like sweaty and giddy like all day, and I couldn't sleep the night before. And I don't know, for me, theater has been like the one thing that when I get to do it, like everything else goes away, and I just love it so much. So maybe you're in the same boat as me, but yeah, some things that I do to get ready is, especially if you're doing a show at a civic theater or a professional theater or just someplace new, like a new school, I always sort of have to mentally tell myself, okay, I'm about to meet a bunch of new people. And depending on if you're a more outgoing person, if you're a more shy person, just get yourself ready to kind of go out of your comfort zone and meet as many people as you can on the first day. Sit to someone you don't know, say hello to someone, ask them, like who they are and what brought them to the show. And I've made so many friends that way, and then you just become so much closer as the show goes along. Make sure that you get enough sleep the night before, and maybe that's hypocritical of me to say because I often can't sleep because I get really excited. But sleep is just the foundation of good health. So I always tell people to get a lot of sleep. It solves a lot of problems in many different ways.
So wise. Sleep is the foundation of good health. Who knew?
I just read this great book, and I could talk about it for way too long, and it has nothing to do with this, but it's called Why We Sleep. Highly recommended. Anyway, what was the last thing I was going to say? Oh, yeah, and I guess this really goes with what Miss Katie was talking about with being prepared, but I feel like I'm always the person who goes in and I know exactly what happens in the entire show. I know every single song. I know the harmonies in every single song. And I'm not saying you have to know everything because you probably will be taught a lot of those things, but I like to know them just so, if I need to be a leader in any way and I'm asked to be in that type of role, I'm ready for it. Just be ready to meet people. Any other thoughts?
This is on mentally preparing, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I suffer from high anxiety. And so, yes, I'm excited for the first day, but my anxiety usually gets the best of me at some point. And something that I tend to have to do is remind myself over and over again that there is a reason that the casting director has hired me. And I was good enough to get this job. I am good enough to have this job because that's my anxiety talking, right? I think that I'm not good enough. I have confidence issues sometimes when I have anxiety. So it's all about reminding myself that no, I deserve this. I work hard. And I booked this gig for a reason. They need me for a reason. And I constantly have to remind myself of that. So if you're high anxiety, just remember they chose you for a reason. You are talented enough to be here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah. The imposter syndrome is real. If you're not familiar with imposter syndrome, look it up because boy, it will really mess with you. And it's basically, if I can sum it up, it's the idea that that you're faking it, you're faking your way through it, and that everyone knows that you're not really, good enough. Baloney. Like Miss Katie said, you would not be there if you hadn't earned that place. I, on the other hand, am an extreme extrovert. So my first day, I get this rush, kind of like what Miss Molly was saying, out of the idea of so many opportunities to make new friends. That is so exciting to me. I was actually at Round Barn a couple of years ago. We had been doing a show for a few weeks and a new show was starting soon. Rehearsals were starting, so the cast was arriving that day. And as their arrivals, as they slowly trickled in, it was just, I think, like 2 or 3 new people. But as they were coming, I was getting more and more excited. And people were like, Paul, are you okay? Did you have too much sugar? What is going on? So what I need to do is to remind myself that you can't immediately be everyone's best friend and kind of play it cool. So remind yourself that you have earned your place and that people will like you as long as you don't force yourself on them and don't be friendly. But for me, that's a very low-key friendliness at first until I know you, and then I latch on.
It's true.
I fall more into the realm of what Miss Katie was talking about, because like I can pretend to be an extroverted person, but I prefer to be an introverted person. The thing what everyone has said is correct. You're there for a reason. The director hired you for a reason. You're a part of this show. You're a part of this group because you booked it. But what I do want to say is in that first day of rehearsal, you are going to hear people around you that are good because they also got their parts for a reason. Don't let someone else's talent influence how you feel about yourself, because you're as talented as that person that's sitting next to you is. You're going to have thoughts. I know I have thoughts in rehearsals where I sit now next to a person, I'm like, wow, that person has a really good voice. Do I sound that good? Don't worry about that. The director and the casting person thought you sounded that good to be a part of this group. But expect to hear people around you that are just as good as you.
Yeah,
and then rise to their level, like work to rise to that level.
You are when it comes to preparation and it comes to anxiety, you could be your own worst enemy in this situation. The best thing that you can do is make that you are prepared when you come in. And directors sometimes expect different things. Sometimes they expect you to know your music when you come in. Sometimes they expect you to be memorized when you come in. Prepare. Do whatever that director or that casting director is asking you to do. And some of those anxieties will go away.
Personally,
I agree.
When I see someone who's like, wow, that person's so good, I have to remind myself, like, and the same people who saw them and cast them saw me and said, yes, give this person a job. So you might be better than you think you are if you're in that person's league, if you are hired for the same gig. Sorry, Molly, I cut you off.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I just loved what you were saying, Ryan, about like having so many other talented people around you. And I think it's so important to be supportive of those other people in your cast and professional with your behavior. And it is really hard because like we're all kind of putting ourselves out there and showing a big part of ourselves by performing, and it's really scary. So no, it's just as scary for that other person who's really talented as well. And I mean, just going up to someone and saying like, wow, you like have an amazing voice, you would be amazed at like just that, how that compliment can affect someone. I just thought of this story where I was at a professional audition, and usually it was an audition setting where like I was also singing in front of other people that were auditioning in the same group that I was, which was a little strange. Usually no one else hears you besides the people on the other side of the table. But there was a girl and we both sang the same song, which happens all the time. It wasn't a big deal. And she was so nice. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, I love the way you sang that. Like, I love this song so much. And it was so cool to hear you sing that. And she didn't need to come out of her way to tell me that, because it's kind of awkward when you sing the same song as someone. Then you start kind of comparing, like, was she better? And I just always strive to be like that girl, because that made a huge difference for me that day. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think one of the other sort of strategies that I employ if I am nervous or if I'm overly excited, like whatever it is, because I've been in both camps where I was so excited to do a show that I was anxiously, manically excited. And I've also had the thing where like, oh, I don't know this group of people and I'm a little bit afraid and I don't feel like I'm good enough to be here. I've had all of those feelings. And I think we've all experienced that range of feelings. One of the things I like to do is visualize my success beforehand. So if I know the space, I'll imagine myself going into the room and either having that sense of calm confidence, like I will visualize myself being the kind of person, the kind of performer, the kind of prepared, the kind of like chill that I want to have. I'll visualize that ahead of time. Sometimes like the night before when I'm going to sleep, or sometimes if I can take a moment, like if it was like during school, take a moment at the end of the school day before play practice starts, whatever it is, just take a minute. And it doesn't take long. I've actually done it like in a bathroom stall, you know, just like sit there for a second and close your eyes and really visualize what that looks like, and visualize yourself being successful. I've used this in other things too, not just like first day of school. I've used it for auditions. I've used visualizing my success, crossing a finish line of a half marathon, and that worked. Like, there've been all kinds of ways and times that I have used that technique, but I find that, like, for mental preparation, that's one of my favorite things to do too. Yay. Paul, I know that you have a unique perspective too. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the first day of school for a director or a music director is a totally different kind of nerve-wracking. And it is nerve-wracking, just as much for us. And I know Ryan can attest to this. So coming into it, we have a little more responsibility, at least on the front end of things. We have to set the tone for the rehearsal period. We have to let people know what kind of rehearsals we run and what it's going to be like. So regarding what we expect from our actors, I send out an email usually a little bit in advance, maybe a week or so in advance, and I just say, hi, I just wanted to introduce myself so that you already have a friendly face when you walk in the door. I'm Paul Regano, I'm the MD, and here's what I expect from you. And I say a lot of the things that we've been saying here. Preparation. I ask that you bring, obviously, your sheet music, because I'm a music director, so my rehearsals will, if it's not a music rehearsal, don't bring your sheet. Well, have it with you. Doesn't matter. Bring your sheet music and a pencil or something to write with. Some water, I recommend, and a way to record the music rehearsal. And if that's your phone, that's fine. Most people do it on their phone these days, as long as that's all that the phone is being used for in the rehearsal. And then I like to do a few icebreakers. I always work time in to do icebreakers and warm-ups. I don't do that every rehearsal, but the first rehearsal, I say, tell me your name, who you're playing in the show, your money note, which we'll get to in a second, and your dream role, or your favorite musical and your dream role. Now, that's a lot of information. So my name is Paul Regano. I am playing Cosmo Brown in Singing in the Rain. My money note is an F above, on the top of the treble clef staff, well, transposed. And my dream role is John Adams in 1776. And I get so much information from that. And my favorite musical is West Side Story. When someone tells me that their dream role is Roxy Hart in Chicago, I say, that person is a dancer. If someone tells me that their favorite musical is Shrek, I say, oh, well, that speaks a lot to their taste and like what they, okay, so see, I just learned something about Miss Molly. My favorite story, when I met an actor, we were doing The Little Mermaid, and we were going around saying all these things, and she said, it got to her, and she said, for my dream role, does it have to be a role that like I could play? I said, absolutely not. Type is out the window, whatever role you want. And she said, okay, Elder Cunningham in Book of Mormon, which, for those of you who don't know the show, is a male role. And it told me so much about her. First of all, it told me that she's funny because she Book of Mormon is a comedy. It told me that she thinks outside the box. And it tells me the kind of humor that she appreciates. So all this to say, what I expect from you is that you are going to know your stuff at least a little. It's my job to get you, to the top of the mountain, but I'm your Sherpa, but, bring your gear. That's a weird analogy. So
I know a lot of 8-year-olds who are obsessed with climbing Everest, so.
Also, 8-year-olds, don't go out of your way to look up Book of Mormon on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
It's a comedy. It's a comedy.
For
That's all you
adults.
say
about it is it's a comedy. I was trying to be as vague as possible about the Book of Mormon, but yes. So that's what I want. Just come in, like everyone's been saying, with an open attitude and ready to learn. What Miss Amber said about don't watch the movie, don't listen to the cast recording is something I like to say too. Some people like to familiarize themselves with the show with a cast recording. I get that, but also I'm gonna teach you the music. So if you read a little music and you can prepare just by looking at the sheet music, that's great. Otherwise, just familiarize yourself with the lyrics, and I don't want you to internalize someone else's performance too much. The more you do that, the less human it becomes. I need to see a human being reacting and acting in real time. And if you just come in with a prepared, I'm going to do it just like Bernadette Peters did on the recording, then why am I watching it? Why don't I just go listen to the cast album?
Yeah, I agree. I think too, there's probably an interesting perspective. Ryan, what are your expectations for your performers on the first day of rehearsal?
First, to kind of talk about what Paul said, there's a lot of anxiety with the people who are going to be your leaders in this process going forward. So know that you're not the only one experiencing anxiety, because you may be experiencing anxiety because because you're jumping into the performance and this is new for you and you don't know anybody. But the director is experiencing a little bit of anxiety because there's 20, 30, 40 people that are expecting that music director or that director in general to kind of lead them through this process. And there's this trust building that has to happen between the director and the actors in the beginning of the process. As a director, I kind of expect you to know the show when you come in. That's one of my biggest things. I like to work very fast. So in the beginning of the process, I don't really give you, I let you play with character a little bit, but what I want to do is give you the blueprint for how the show is going to run. So here's where you stand, you cross on this line. But feel free to live within the spaces when you move to that spot. You're not stuck there, but you're moving from point A to point B on these lines. And so I give that to you up front. Then we jump into character stuff. But to know where you live within the space is the first thing I want you to know before I go into character work. And I'm open to character questions, and I'm fine with throwing a couple character things in here or there if I want to steer that person in the right direction. But for the most part, those first few days are, let's learn how you live within the space that you're kind of inhabiting. I also think that as a director, you want to make sure that you're not being overbearing. And I know I said that earlier too, but I want everyone that is doing the show or a part of the process to feel comfortable, and to feel comfortable enough to say, hey, what if I tried this? And my goal is to always go for that. Hey, let's see it. Let's see what we did. A show last year at Round Barn Theater called The Sunshine Boys. And I had an actor that suggested bringing a prop on stage with him. And I said, hey, let's try it and see how it works. It was hilarious. So it stayed within the show. So be ready to collaborate. Be ready to work with that director, and the director if you want to be a director, be ready to work with that actor. Do not be overbearing. Let the actor do what the actor needs to do. And I know that goes off a little bit from what we were talking about, but those are kind of my expectations in the process.
It's a table talk. We can't stay on topic. That's great. Miss Katie, when you have a camp, what's your expectation of your campers on day one?
Yeah, so camp's a little different in the fact that you probably don't get your scripts ahead of time. And if it's like our camp where we are keeping it more of a review recital kind of situation, you probably don't know the numbers yet that you're going to be doing because we pick them and then you find out when you get there. Now we're going to have 3 weeks to put it together, but I've done camps in a week. And I've worked for Prairie Fire Children's Theater where we put a show up every week in 5 days time. And those kids don't get their scripts until that first day of rehearsal. And they don't get them until because we audition them on the spot. So when they walk in, they have to be ready to audition. And then after they audition, we cast them on the spot and then give them their stuff and we start rehearsals that night. So you can't necessarily prepare in the sense that you may not know the show beforehand. However, you can make sure that you're on task. You can make sure you bring a pencil. You can make sure you're wearing clothes that you can easily move in comfortably. And you can wear the proper shoes, and you can bring a water bottle. Those are the big ones for camp styles usually. Now, there are plenty of camps who do give you your scripts ahead of time, in which case do exactly what we've been talking about. Familiarize yourself with the story and read your script. If you already know what part you're going to play, mark your lines so that you're ready to go. But other than that, it's really, for campers, the biggest thing is having a positive attitude no matter what part you are, and staying on task, for me, are the two big ones for campers.
What about for choreographers, Miss Molly? What are your expectations of your actors in a choreography rehearsal?
That's such a good question, because I don't know. My experience with choreography so far has been with high school students, which I really, really love doing. And I want to run their rehearsals as professionally as possible, so that if they want to do this past high school, they know what it's going to be like. But I also like really strive to be a fun choreographer. Like, I want to be the choreographer that the kids are like, oh, she's cool. So it's kind of hard to find that balance, because two of my biggest pet peeves ever is when someone is talking while I'm trying to teach choreography, and when I teach you a lot of choreography and then we do it the next day and you don't remember any of it. Not only do you not remember it, but you don't have it written down, which means I have to take time to reteach that to you. And in a show, I just choreographed Big Fish. In Act 1 alone, there were six huge dance numbers, and I frankly didn't have time to go back and teach. So it was very, very frustrating when we'd get to a song and no one would remember. So if you are in a choreography rehearsal, be very professional, don't talk, but do ask questions. Do you have a question? Raise your hand, and write down that choreography afterwards, or see if someone can have a video taken of the choreography so that you can practice it. And the next time you come back to that number, it's totally fine to miss a few things. I mean, we're all learning it, myself as well. But know what it should be so that your choreographer doesn't have to reteach it. And that's going to help the choreographer know that there's people in the cast they can depend on to help them teach the other cast members if they have to move on to a new dance. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, so be ready to write stuff down and be ready to listen. Don't talk. Yeah, that's great.
To pile on top of Molly's point, or Miss Molly, I feel like I'm using the wrong words when I'm referring to people. Anyway, so to pile on top of Miss Molly's point, also make sure you know your staging, or what we would call blocking. Don't go through an entire blocking rehearsal, not write anything down, and then come back the next day and say you don't remember how you're supposed to move, because it's just as frustrating if you can't remember your choreography, especially if that director has spent a lot of time making sure you know how you move or live within the space that you're in. So make sure you write down choreography, but also make sure you're writing down and memorizing blocking or staging as well.
And maybe harmonies.
I was about to say,
maybe harmonies.
Not to be a broken record, but yes, right. Harmonies, which harmonies you're singing. But also, the majority of what I like to do in music rehearsals, I like to learn the music. Like Ryan said, I like to learn it as quick as possible, and then I want to go in and tweak it. So people who have been in music rehearsals with me, you know that a lot of what I like to spend my time on is the dynamics or the accents, and say, especially in pieces like we did at Round Barn, we did Mamma Mia a couple of years ago, and so much of that music has backup vocals and chorus singing. And so the chorus is almost like a Greek chorus. It's setting the tone for the show. And so you need to do that with your voice the same way that you would if you were singing a solo, but it's a group. So the entire group has to know that it can't be Mamma Mia, it has to be Mamma Mia, here I go again, and things like that. Write that stuff down, because that is where I'm really going to see that you remembered what we did.
That's magic.
And to fold it all back in, to go right back to Miss Katie's point, in community theater, in professional theater, in educational theater, bring a pencil, bring a water bottle, bring your script, and bring your score. Those things are universal things that you should bring to any rehearsal that you're a part of, no matter what type of theater it is.
I love it. So I think we've really covered some of those topics, and I feel like people would be really well prepared. I kind of want to talk about like fun things to do on that first day of rehearsal so that you can keep your objectives on positive stuff. You guys know I love to gamify things. So if I have a particularly challenging day or a particular challenging rehearsal that I'm going into, I will give myself a scavenger hunt that I have to do and a reward that I will get if I get the scavenger hunt done. So it will be like have a short conversation with one of the directing team, talk to the stage manager a little bit, like check in with these people. So I'll give myself little conversations that I need to have. Sometimes, so that I can keep myself focused, I will make myself like collect things or look for things on my way. So I'll be like, okay, I'm going to find a leaf that I really like on the way in so that I'm focusing on something other than a rehearsal. Or I'm going to find all the spaces in the building that I'm going to need. And I'm going to give myself a list. Like I'm going to find the restroom. I'm going to find out where I can fill my water bottle, and I'll give myself that list. And if I achieve everything on my little list, then I get ice cream or a fancy coffee or something like that. I think it's also important to put something on that list about introducing yourself to another of your fellow performers and trying to have an outward sort of exchange with someone. Tell someone something lovely about them, and really listen to somebody. Like tell somebody that like if something happens and it's a positive thing, like, oh, that person, that high E that person just belted was extremely impressive. Tell them. People don't compliment each other. If you like somebody's coat, tell them that. Like, oh, I love your shoes. Or are those Laducas?
Oh, a side note. I posted a video. This is completely random.
I love it.
I posted a video of the drama club dance that I'm teaching today, which by the time this is out, you will have already seen on the Facebook page.
It's so good.
I'm wearing my Laducas, which are just fancy character shoes. It doesn't really matter that much. But people think they're cool, so I have a pair. And
people think they're cool, so I have them.
I mean, I have them. But the Laducas Instagram, like, put my story on their story. So I'm featured on the Laducas Instagram right now. Well, by the time you see this, it will be over. But
amazing.
I woke up to that amazing news.
That's awesome.
So,
I love that.
an international brand recognizes Molly's greatness.
So we're going to get a lot of people coming to dance class today.
Love it. Love it. It's so cute. But yeah, so yeah, don't be afraid to compliment people, and don't be afraid to compliment Laducas. And on that note, one thing I love to do on the first day of rehearsal is take a first day of school picture. So take a picture of your script and yourself and something. And if you have a friend in the play, you and your friend in the script or whatever. But take a fun photo and put it online and let everybody know that you're doing something cool, because not everybody has the courage to go to that audition, to accept that role when they get cast, to like do what it takes to get to the point where you're actually doing a play with other live people. Very few people have that courage, and you should recognize yourself for that. So take that picture, put it on social media if you have social media, or just keep it for yourself. You'll never regret having that memento. So yes, take a first day of school picture. Do you guys have any other fun stuff you do?
Well, speaking of social media,
Yes.
what I love to do, my favorite game, is as you meet people, you play the "Who do you know that I know" game.
That's so fun.
Which has gotten much easier now with the advent of social media, that I can just like, Katie Barnes. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Oh, you know Travis. How do we, so then you get to talk about people that you know, people that you both think are wonderful, people that you both think aren't so wonderful. Mostly people that you think are wonderful because it's the first day and you're making a good impression. No, that's my favorite thing is the "Who do you know that I know," because it's such a small business. It's huge. There's so many people in it, but it's so small. Everybody knows everybody. Be nice to everybody always. So that's my thing. Again, that's my extroverted instinct, is to like, how can I make new friends and new connections?
I totally agree with Paul, and he took the words right out of my mouth. being nice, and that's what Amber said too, being nice is so important because you never know who you're talking to, especially in a professional setting. You never know who you're talking to. You never know if that person could get you your next job. You never know. I'm not saying use those people for those things, but I'm saying being kind could lead to better things for you in the future. So always be nice to everyone you're around, no matter who it is.
That's awesome.
Oh, I'm gonna agree with Paul. He literally took mine. I was gonna say the who do you know game, because it is one of my favorite things to do on the first day is be like, okay, and it's part of my anxiety, right? We talked about how Miss Katie has anxiety, so she feels a little nervous on the first day. Sometimes she has to find tricks to trick her brain, and one of those is to make friends. So to do that, I try to find some kind of connection with them. Oh, you've worked for so and so. Oh, you worked at that place. I worked at that place, or I had a friend that worked there, and like, who do we know that has that connection for us? And then it's an easy way to make friends that way, because if they know someone you know and you both like them, there's a good chance you'll probably like each other. But for camp styles, one of my favorite things to do as the director is try to memorize everyone's name. So like there's that waiting period before we actually get started when we're doing roll call and everybody's coming in, trickling in for that first meeting or whatever. And I'll start with just the first line and I'll be like, what's your name? And they'll tell me their name and I'll say it back to myself. And then I move on to the next kid and I ask them their name. They tell me, and then I'm like, I say their name. And then I'll start back at the beginning and I'll say that first person's name and then the second person's name. And then I'll start on the third person and I'll go back to the beginning every time. And it's this game I used to play, especially on tour, Ryan, for Prairie Fire. My tour partners would get so mad at me because that's what I would do beforehand. They were mad because they couldn't memorize that quickly. So they'd be like, it's not fair that you know all the kids' names already. I'm like, well, play my game, then maybe you too will know their names.
It's funny Miss Katie says that because that's how me and Miss Katie became friends, was we had both worked for Prairie Fire Children's Theater at different times. And we were like, hey, you know people I know. And that's how we became friends.
So quick. Like Amber was like, oh, you guys are going to like each other because you both worked for Prairie Fire. And I was like, what? And then we were best friends from then on out.
True. What about you, Miss Molly? You have any fun strategies?
Let's see. I really like, I love like getting to have a conversation with the cast about like the vision of the show and the things that are going to be really exciting about doing the show, because when I'm acting and there's time to have like that sort of a conversation at the beginning, it just gets me so excited about the process that's about to unfold. So I love the show that I choreographed. I love sitting down with the director, and my job as a choreographer is to show their vision through dance. You know, like I want to make sure that we are entirely communicating together all the time. So I had a really fun time like sitting down with all the students and being like, okay, this is what this show means, and like what is important to you about this topic, like here's how we're going to do this through dance, and like just get everyone super pumped. So yeah. I love that.
That's awesome. So I think
I love you.
Yeah.
I love your energy. Like I just love it so much.
Well, thanks.
So those are some great strategies and ways to have fun on that first day of rehearsal. And I think that's the key thing to remember, is that you should be having fun, and that other people are there hoping to also have the same experience. So be like-minded and enjoy that first day of rehearsal, even if it's a little bit scary. So today's roundtable topic is, what was your scariest first day of rehearsal and what did you learn? So going into these situations, you guys, like, I know you look at us and you think, look at those beautiful, intelligent experts. Like, I have no hope of ever being like them because they're so amazing. I know that's what you're all thinking, obviously, but we are regular people, just like all of you. So we have all had the same experience of coming into these rehearsals and being terrified or being excited or any range of emotions. So Miss Molly, you seemed excited by the roundtable topic today. What is your scary first day of rehearsal? What did you learn on that day?
So this is a very unusual first day of rehearsal. It's not very likely it will happen to anyone again. But So last summer, I've mentioned many times, I worked at a summer stock theater that was very, very busy. I was really fortunate because I was hired to do their entire summer season, but I was also hired at a different theater in Michigan for about 3 to 4 weeks to do a show that I really, really wanted to do. So I talked to the other theater that hired me and I said, hey, I have this opportunity. I'm definitely going to take it. Is there any way that I could be a part of your season up until the point I have to leave for this other show and then come back directly when that show is over? And I wasn't sure if they would say yes or not because I know there's a lot to ask. They ended up saying yes. So I left and I was doing another show in a different place. And I knew that when I got back and I talked to everyone before I left, they would be about 2 days away from opening Mamma Mia. So I said to them, obviously I can't really be in the show very much because I'm only going to be there for 2 days of rehearsal. But if you want, I can play like keyboard 4 in the pit just so I can be a part of it. And like, if you want to throw me in one dance number, that's fine. So I got back, and I think like a week or so before I got back, I was being sent all of these dance videos, and I was like, am I in this? Like, did they put me in this many songs in the show? Turns out the choreographer, who I love dearly, I mean, he's amazing, he had put me in about 6 dance numbers. And along with that, I had also committed to playing keyboard 4 anytime I wasn't on stage. So I went from doing as little as possible that I thought would be best to probably doing more than anyone else in the entire show and only having 2 days of rehearsal. So my first day of rehearsal was everyone else's final dress rehearsal. It was awful. I spent the entire day in our rehearsal space with the choreographer and a couple members of the cast, just, you know, like, here's this dance, here's what it is, you stand here, you're with this partner, you enter here and you exit here and you're in this costume. And I was like, I have never in my life felt like I can't do this. I was like, there is no way that I'm going to go on the stage tonight and perform this show. So I had one dress rehearsal, and I remember I was sitting in the pit right before the show started because I played the overture, but then I went up to be in Mamma Mia, and then I came back down and I went. It was crazy. I'm not even that good at the piano. I don't even know why I did this. And I remember, like, that dress rehearsal, we all popped our heads up for the Mamma Mia, and we sang it in a staccato fashion, like Paul mentioned. And I remember, like, I popped my head out of the door that was my door, and I was in costume and the lights were on me, and it was the most out-of-body experience in the entire world because as I was singing, I didn't even know what the next words were. And I was like, I'm on stage. So yeah, that was terrifying. I did indeed do the show opening night, and every night from there on, there were some songs that I was not singing because I didn't know the words. So I was just lip syncing, which you shouldn't do, but in that very weird situation. What I learned from that is that I'm capable of a lot more than I thought I was, and you are too. When the pressure is on and you have to learn something, you're gonna be okay. I remember, sorry, this is so long, but it was so funny. We were sitting in the pit right before the show started, and I was talking to our music director, who is a very close friend of mine, about the situation. I was like, well, I'm in a few more dance numbers than I thought I'd be. And he was like asking me, you know, what my track was like and when I would be in the pit and when I wouldn't. And I told him, and he was like, when did you learn this? And I said, today. And he was like, wow, I'd be freaking out if I were you. And everyone else in the rest of the pit went, why would you say that? And I was like, Brent, I know I am. You're making it worse. But yeah, that's my story.
How about you, Ryan? Oh, no, Paul.
I was just going to say, I've seen the Keyboard 1 book of Mamma Mia, and I'm sure you were fine on Keyboard 4.
I played a couple of notes.
Sorry, Ryan, go on.
I'm going to come at it from a different tact, and I'm going to talk about the first, the most nervous I was when I had to direct a show. And there have been a couple different ones. There was a show that I had to direct in a week and a half that no one had ever heard or seen, and there's no video of it anywhere. And it was also the very first show that I directed at the Round Theater. So there was a lot of high pressure with that show. Luckily, everything went fine. But I would probably say the most nervous I ever was in college when I directed was technically, I directed my very first show called The Drowsy Chaperone. And I was walking into a cast of 35 people. I had never directed a show. I had done a couple sketches here and there. I didn't know the show. I had just read it before, I had read it prior to coming in and directing it, but I didn't know the show before that. I barely had spoken with my team until that first day of rehearsals, and then it was all student run, so there was a lot of expectation on students to kind of know what they were doing. Luckily, I had an awesome team, but I had nightmares leading up to that. I had nightmares where I was directing somebody and they stood up and said no and walked out of the theater. I had so many directing nightmares because I was so nervous of jumping into this the first time. But just like anything, I put my head down. I knew the show. I had written out my blocking. I knew what I wanted to do. I put my head down and we charged forward. But there was nothing like the anxiety of walking into a show of 35 people and never having directed before. And you can experience that same thing if you've never acted in a show before too. So it kind of goes both ways.
What about you, Miss Katie? What's your scariest first day?
Well, I have to. So I've got one for directing because one year for camp at Round Barn, there was some red tape that we ran into that was out of my control as the director. I did nothing wrong, but I ended up having 48 hours to throw my first camp together. And then I basically was blocking on the spot to keep camp moving. And it was one of the scariest things. Ryan was there. Miss Amber was there. So they remember. I didn't sleep that week. It was a stressful week. And then that same summer, we had a week in between the two camps, and I spent that week writing the script, and Amber spent the week writing lyrics and picking songs. And we threw a show together for our second week of camp because, once again, red tape out of our control. But either way, we had to keep camp moving.
We wrote a show.
We wrote a show in a week.
You killed it. It was so good. It was so good.
So I always tend to get nervous before the first day of rehearsal for camps because once again, Miss Katie suffers from anxiety, and so my biggest thing is always concern of failing my students. I don't ever want to fail you guys, and that's how I always feel. So I always say a prayer the night before that's like, dear God, please don't let me fail them. Let them have a good week, keep them safe, and keep us moving. And literally I say this prayer every time before camp starts because it just makes me feel better. I feel like maybe everything will be okay now, and it always is. That's the thing. Like, my kids are always so great. But a fun one for professional side. It was actually that same season, but it was like at the beginning of the season. There were only like 5 of us that were brought in at the beginning of the season for this Frog and Toad. And I only knew Ryan and Amber, of course, and Paul. I knew Paul a little bit from when he had been there before, but we hadn't really worked together. We had only crossed paths. And so I didn't really know people. And I had some anxiety, and I took our first break and I went back to my housing unit, and I realized that my shirt was on backwards the entire first half of the day of rehearsals. And nobody said anything to me about it. And I was just like, cool, way to make a great first impression. So, it's fine. They know me as a human at that point. They know what to expect.
I don't even think I noticed.
I don't think I did
You
either.
probably didn't. You
I don't
probably
even think I
didn't.
noticed.
I noticed. I just thought it was intentional.
You hush, Paul. You hush.
How about you, Paul? Scariest first day.
Yeah, I've got 2 because Miss Molly reminded me of one. And so the one that Miss Molly reminded me of was I was asked to fill in on a production of Beauty and the Beast. A lot of Beauty and the Beast talk today. And I was asked if I could come in and play keys too. And I was coming in the first time that my first rehearsal, The first time I looked at the book, they couldn't get me the book beforehand. I sight read at their dress rehearsal.
Ugh.
And I walked in ready to sight read the Keys 2 book on Beauty and the Beast. It was at at this high school production. They had a full pit. It was beautiful. All students and a few pros. They had 2 harpists on this production. I walk in and the director hands me the book and says, "So you'll be playing Keys 1. Terrifying. But I got through it, and I just nose to the grindstone, just you can't stop because the kids on stage know the show and they're just going, and everybody else in the pit has been playing. And then at intermission, at the first break that I got, I found out, talk about small world, the guitarist that I was playing next to is the brother of someone that I went to college with. Yeah, it's just a small world. The other most terrifying first day of rehearsal, oh God, what was it? I'm forgetting it. Has anyone not gone? Can you come back to me? What's the other one? I was music directing something and I can't remember what show it was. I have no recollection. I'm so sorry. I'm blanking on this. Oh, yes. I was 20 years old. I was still in school, and it was a summer. It was between my sophomore and junior year of college. And I said, this is the first time in my life I'm going to try to make my living as a musician this summer. And I took to the job sites and I found a job, and I was music directing my first New York City off-Broadway show. It was not off-Broadway. It did not qualify. It was actually in the basement of the Drama Bookshop, which is a rehearsal studio, but they were treating it like a theater. It was a cast of, again, like Ryan said, 35 people, but these were still New York professionals. I was 20, there were 35 of them, and the guy asked me to orchestrate the show for a 5-piece pit. Ultimately, there was only one performance of our 6-week run that the audience actually outnumbered the cast. So it was not, I learned a lot that day. And I was terrified, and there was no, hi, nice to meet you. There was no meet and greet. There was no cheese plate. It was, here's the first rehearsal, start teaching the finale. And I was absolutely, there's a lot more to this story and reasons why I was terrified, but I was 20 years old and I was in New York City doing a show, and I was freaking out, and everyone was so understanding. I had nothing to be frightened of. So that's the moral of the story, is that, you are always going to, it's more scared of you than you are of it when it comes to the first rehearsal.
That's hilarious. My worst day was my first week here at Round Barn Theater back in 2000, and I had come in as an emergency replacement for a woman who was going back to New York City, and I had to go on I'd opened 2 shows in 2 days, and they were giving me 1 put-in rehearsal. So for that put-in rehearsal, I had to learn an ensemble track for Aida and Ruth Winters and Plain and Fancy. So that was a thing. So we're doing the rehearsal, and I thought things were going fine. I was a little bit frazzled because it was a lot of dancing for Aida, and there was a runway show thing where I had to do a quick change. I have a story about that for later, for my opening night with that. But we were about to start Act 2, and someone asked the question, what about the round table after tonight's performance? And this is the performance where I was going on. And I was like, oh, there's a round table? They're like, oh, yeah, do you not know this? Bob Falls, the director of the original Broadway production of Aida, is here tonight. And he's doing a radio broadcast roundtable about Aida. And he's going to be taking questions from the audience. So it's a bunch of people from Chicago who are going to be here tonight. And Bob Falls is the guest of honor. He's going to be speaking. I was like, what? And I had some major things that I did horribly wrong. And those are stories for another time. But then I also had to go on for Plain and Fancy that next afternoon at the matinee at 2:00 after this like crazy performance of Aida, where I threw myself at it. And Ruth Winters has the first line of Plain and Fancy. And thank goodness that line is, "We were doing fine." We were doing fine. Everything is okay. But for that show, that put in rehearsal, as I was shadowing the woman who was doing her last performance as Ruth, the person who was playing opposite me brought 24 roses out before the performance and said to her, "I am so sad that you're leaving. The show is not going to be the same without you. There is nothing that will make this show what it has been with you in it." I was like, cool. So glad. So that was my worst like day. And that rehearsal, that 2-hour rehearsal that I had to prep for these two major roles, it was terrifying and scary, but you just have to focus on doing it and moving forward and going. And that's it. What I learned that day was that you just have to do it. You just do it. Don't get mired down in your thoughts. Don't get mired down in being overwhelmed. Know that it's just going to happen, and you got to like belt yourself in, strap yourself onto the comet, and know that it's going to be fast and scary and all of that, but you just got to keep going. So yeah, that was my scariest day. You guys, your scariest days. Everybody's scariest first day of rehearsal is likely worse than anything our students will experience. Like there's so much stuff that happens. Oh my goodness. But yeah, don't let yourself be intimidated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul.
I think also like a lot of what I found, a lot of what was terrifying to our first days were things that had to do with last minute changes or other things that relate to preparation. And all of our viewers are a little bit younger than us, so they luckily have so much more at their disposal in terms of communication and the internet. You can, again, I don't advise it, but break glass in case of emergency. You can go to YouTube or Spotify or something and hear the songs. You can communicate with you. They could Skype you into rehearsal so you could watch and learn the choreography in real time or something. So a lot of these things that we're talking about, luckily, are becoming less frequent now.
Yeah, it's less stressful, definitely. So you guys are going to have resources at your disposal that we didn't have in our early careers. And Miss Molly, you're in the early part of your career started at 9, but you're in the early part of your career. You're going to have all of these advantages. But again, that creates extra pressure because she starts getting emails of all of these videos, which is great to have, but also that's a lot. It's a lot of material. So that rounds up our roundtable discussion for this week, and that's it for episode 6 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. This one was great. This one was a lot of fun. I think next week we had 2 ideas for next week's episode, you guys, and I think next week we are going to dispense with the wisdom, and we're going to do an episode called "What I Wish I Had Known."
Ooh.
Yeah, so we're going to let you guys in on some of the things that we wish we had known in our early careers or when we were still in educational theater, or just even about life. Things we had wished that we had known. So tune in next week for episode 7 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. This has been a blast. Thank you, Molly, Katie, and Paul, our regular panelists, and thank you to our special guest, Ryan Schisler. Ryan, if folks want to audition at the Round Barn Theater, how do they do that? Who do they email?
Right now, we're taking virtual submissions for a few shows that are coming up in our season. So if you would like to email me a virtual submission, you can send that to ryan@thebarns@nappanee.com.
And we will put that in the description on the video too, so you guys can all see that. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Molly, Paul, and Katie. We'll see you guys next. Paul, do you want to join us next week for What I Wish I'd Known? What do you think?
I I will have to cancel my weekly basketball game. But yeah, I guess I can move some stuff around.
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be great. We'd love to have you back. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, panelists and special guests. And we'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.